From the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg, this is a special edition of Inside Government with Cedric Peterson.
Audience here at home and around the world, you are now Inside Government. In this edition of the program, our conversation concerning the importance of preparing for the hurricane season continues. As the government continues to prepare for hurricane season 2023, we wanted to invite organizations that are also doing the same and make up the Emergency Operations Center representing ESF. That's the Emergency Support Function Group. Number 2 is none other than the Department of Bureau, Telecommunications, and Post. And representing the department with us is Interim Director, Mrs. Judiana Labega Hoover, and we also have Ms. Krista Pontiflet, Office Manager and Responsibility for Postal Affairs. Ladies, it's great to have you in the program.
Thank you for having us. Good day, Cedric.
Thank you for having us as well, Cedric. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity for us to share some information with the public.
And that's what it's all about. It's indeed about sharing that information because we need everyone to be on board as we are progressing and developing this country. Let's jump right into it. BTP, Bureau of Telecommunications and Post, for those that do not know, educate us. What does this organization do within our small island developing state?
Okay, BTP was established in 10. We were formerly a Netherlands Antilles body, and our primary task is to regulate the postal and telecommunications sector. We also have an advisory role to the minister and to Parliament, and we are also giving advice on legislation regarding telecommunications and post to both the minister and Parliament. So that is basically in a nutshell what we do.
Do you guys actually work and initiate most of your activities and then get the minister involved, or is it the top-down approach? What approach is normally taken?
Ideally, we would have a telecommunications and a postal roadmap, and then based on that, then we can work downwards. But of course, we're still in a phase where we're trying to figure things out, even though we're 13 years down the line. So a lot of the initiation comes then from the regulator when we see whatever is playing in the industry. And wherever the need exists for an amendment to be made, we then initiate it and we submit this to the Minister and Parliament for review and acceptance.
Judy, give us some insight in regard to that transition coming out of Netherlands Antilles to Country St. Martin when the responsibility actually landed with us full-blown. What was that transition like for the organization?
It wasn't an easy one because all of the knowledge was centralized in Curacao. And we basically were just put in the middle of an ocean on 10 with no financial resources and limited network and infrastructure as well. So we were basically left to figure it out for ourselves. But by the grace of God, we were able to establish a well-functioning bureau within the last 13 years.
Okay. And within that 13-year period, what has been your priority as an organization throughout the 13 years if you had to review that timeline?
Okay. Initially, it was setting up the bureau and ensuring that we had a proper oversight of who our customers were, what their outstanding balances were, what frameworks legislatively we had to work within. Then we focused on the telecommunications sector. And this year, with the assistance of Krista, we have made the postal sector our priority. So for the entire year, we have been literally focusing primarily on the postal sector.
The staff training department prep, let's start there. What was the investment like when it comes to making sure that everyone meets the necessary requirements?
Ooh, that was a tough one. It was a process of hiring, firing, changing, trying to figure out who would fit finally within the organization, especially for the telecommunications sector that involves a lot of travel because it's a fast-changing industry. I mean, if we look back to 10 years ago, we had 3G, and now we're in LTE. So it's been a fast developing sector. But the postal sector as well, because we have signed international treaties with the UN regarding the postal sector. And for a long time, it was put on the back burner. But as we have been progressing and we've had extraordinary congresses with the United Nations, the United Postal Union, the importance of the post office has also begin to come to the forefront. And that is why then I assigned this, Krista specifically to this, because it's a very legal matter. There's a lot of legislation. It's a lot of travel as well. It's an intense industry whereby a lot of changes is taking place because they're trying to revamp the postal sector to make it more modern and self-sustainable. So we're now looking at e-post, we're now looking at e-commerce. But all those industries touch so many different columns within our government. We're talking about customs, we're talking about finance for taxes, we're talking about general affairs for the post office itself. So it's a very vast and heavy portfolio to carry. And I needed someone with a legal background. So we invested in Krista as well for her to follow her legal studies to be able to follow and carry through this big package on her own.
Awesome segue there, Juliana. That puts us right over to you, Krista, and welcome again to the program.
Thank you.
The Postal Service, and Juliana actually just set it up because the question is, really, postal services in the world of electronic mail, this thing still exists?
Yeah.
And you did indicate it is a challenge there because you're trying to bring this very old version of information management into the 21st century and keep it relevant. What was your responsibility like in trying to make sure that things are still working and functioning properly?
Well, my first, I would say, experience with the postal, I was assigned to travel to the Congress in Abidjan in August 2021. And it was an eye-opener because you're in a setting with so many different countries and you see the things that the different countries are doing that we are not doing. So it kind of gives you, okay, but how do we get this done in St. Martin? So while we were there, we actually connected with some of the representatives from the Universal Postal Union, and we arranged to have a project done where they would come and see, do a site visit and do basically help us to navigate and figure out how we can make our post office or postal sector more self-sustainable, as Ms. Labega Hoover said. So that project is still ongoing. The representatives were here last year. The report is in its final stages. So once we have that, then we would be able to actually do more and set our postal sector up properly.
Great. I want to continue on this line of conversation concerning the postal services and establish a little bit more of a better understanding of those international agreements and standards that we're trying to meet. And we're going to continue our conversation right after this break. Stay with us. You're Inside Government.
During the hurricane season, patients with chronic long-term diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, kidney disease, and others who need to follow a specific diet are reminded to ensure that their hurricane kit includes 2 weeks of non-perishable foods that allow them to continue to follow their recommended diet. These patients should also have extra medication and medical supplies and continue to use them as prescribed by their house doctor or other treating physician during and after the hurricane. These items vary per patient, so patients should contact their doctor to find out what the most suitable foods for their conditions are. If you have a family member or a friend who takes prescribed medications or needs to follow a specific diet, call, text, or pass by them to make sure that they're prepared. This message has been brought to you by the Samarta Medical Center and the Department of Communication.
Hi, everyone. If you're just joining us, I'm having a conversation with my colleagues at the Bureau of Telecommunications and Post. I'm joined by Interim Director of the Department, Mrs. Judy-Ann Labega Hoover, and of course, we have Office Manager and Postal Affairs, responsible for Postal Affairs, Ms. Krista Pontivlet. If you're just joining us, we're actually just continuing on our conversation concerning postal services and where we are, again, bringing this, what people would look at, or at least a young generation would look at as, my goodness, this old tech. You guys are still sending mail. It's still functioning, and it's being brought into the 21st century of
Correct.
standards. Let's look at the international standards that you have to meet. And you brought up in our previous segment the practices of other countries,
Correct.
what they're doing.
Yes.
Give us some insight there. What are other countries doing with their postal services in a modern world?
Well, in some countries you have at the post office, they have more than just sending and receiving mail. They have various, how should I say, services that they offer. You can pay your bills, you can pick up checks. So there's a range of activities that are happening at other post offices that unfortunately we are not doing here, I'll say yet, because the plan is, as we mentioned earlier, to make PSS more self-sustainable. So I think that it's very important for us to attend these meetings. We actually have one upcoming in August, and that is a preparatory meeting for the Extraordinary Congress that is happening in Saudi Arabia in October. And some of the main points that they want to address are one is the reduction of the green gas emissions. Because, with the post and delivering mail and everything, we're trying to make, less paper basically.
Yeah.
And also what they're doing is they want to open up the union to the wider postal sector players. And that has been in the planning for years before I even started doing anything with Post. So I think we're going to have to vote on that this coming Congress, and that's going to open up the sector to a lot of different opportunities.
Okay. So
And, sorry if I may interject.
You'll read that.
When we say the wider sector players, we're referring to the FedEx, DHL,
Correct.
UP, USP,
USPS.
and all of those players. What we're looking at as member countries, because we're 194 countries that are member of the Postal Union, to see where these wider sector players can assist the post office in becoming more efficient and effective in delivering packages. So it could be either in the first leg, where it'd be then the reporting aspect of when you receive packages, because just like everything else, when packages are received, we have to report to the union the content, the weight, the frequency, where these packages are going to and stuff like that. Then there's also the middle leg, which has been from the post office to the receiving country. And then there's the last mile, which would be then from the receiving country after customs to the customer itself. So those are the three areas where we're deliberating as a group to see where the wider sector players can assist us as post office with their expertise, with their infrastructure, with their knowledge, with their financial input to make the entire postal industry more efficient. So that is going to be a big point of discussion that will also affect PSS St. Martin. Because once again, as we agree on these treaties on a United Nations level, those adjustments need to be made in our legislation as well.
And that's what I was going to ask you.
So that is why it's so important that we attend these sessions, that we actively participate and vote in these sessions, because all of these decisions have effects and impact on our local market as well.
Right.
And Krista can maybe elaborate more on it, but we even had a breakaway session here 2 weeks ago with Aruba, Curacao, and ourselves, and the post offices as well from Curacao and St. Martin, where we discussed these points. We expressed our positions, our concerns, the pros, the cons. And this was all, again, in preparation for the meeting in August, where we will be meeting with the UPA-EP, and maybe Krista can explain you more on that one.
Yeah, go right ahead, Krista.
Yes, so the three islands, Aruba, Curacao, we share the same seat. So for the preparatory meeting, it's important for us to all basically hold the same head, because when it comes to voting, we all need to be on the same page, when moving forward with those decisions. So that's interesting.
Interesting take on that, because I was about to ask you about the three countries, how they actually feed into each other.
Yeah.
I have to give you a real-world example, a registered mail sent from St. Martin to Curacao, and that took 3 weeks. Is that normal for us within the Antilles, especially moving forward with the three countries cooperating from a postal perspective? Or is that an area of an opportunity that we want to get to a shorter time?
Exactly. That is something that needs to be worked on, because to answer your question, it's not normal. It should not take that long. I actually had someone approach me and they said, I sent I ordered something from Curacao and it went to Miami.
Right.
That was about to explain. You would be
Right.
surprised after the break of the Netherlands Antilles, and we no longer had a national carrier. We think back on ALM, on incident, where we had daily frequent flights to get cargo and shipments from Curacao to St. Martin. It goes via Miami. There is no longer direct.
And that's because of
the
the
breakup.
fact that the breakup of the
Yeah.
Netherlands Antilles, not having that national carrier operating at the level of what we knew in the
Exactly.
past.
And we were accustomed to that in the
Exactly.
past.
Exactly.
So for us that are a bit older,
Yeah.
it's why is it taking 3 weeks now? But that was one of the consequences of the decision to break the Netherlands Antilles up.
Much to be done.
Yes,
Clearly.
yes, there is.
In this segment, I also want to cover one of the points concerning the number management system that we spoke about off camera. First of all, how does that work? How does it apply within the telecommunications infrastructure? Explain, Juliana, how does that numbering management system work in our country?
Okay, when we became Country St. Martin, we had made a decision to become part of the North American Numbering Plan. So we then have the +1, and then we were assigned 721 for St. Martin. And then the country itself got 3 number blocks because we then had 3 concession holders, which was Telem, Telcel, and then UTS, which is now Flow. So those 3 entities that provide voice have number blocks. We also have spare number blocks available in the event we get new concession holders providing voice services. We do have 2 new ones, but they're not operational as yet, so they don't have any assigned numbers to them. These numbers need to be registered in a certain format, and they need to be reported to the North American Numbering Plan Association so that it can see what do we have as short code numbers, what do we have as emergency numbers, and then what do we have assigned to each operator. So, for example, I think when we had the COVID, for example, we had a short code, I can't remember, it was like 9211 or whatever it is. That needed to be registered at the North American Numbering Plan as well for them to take note that that short code was being used during COVID in St. Martin for emergency services to get contact with the healthcare department and to report your illness, however it may be. So in light thereof, we have decided to take the management of that service and bring it in-house so we can have a better control over it.
We're having a conversation with the Bureau of Telecommunications and Posts. Stay with us. Our conversation continues in our final segment, Inside Government. During the hurricane season, a potential tropical cyclone can produce rainfall that can cause flash flooding and rockfalls. Stay away from flood-prone areas during heavy rainfall, such as Jump Up Casino on Emil Plain Road in Phillipsburg, ATLH Road Roundabout, L.B. Scott Road from Emilio Wilson Park until Cake House Supermarket, Zakers Gut from Petro Plus gas station until the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Welgelaken Road K Hill from Welgelaken Road Roundabout until the Wantete Loke Roundabout, Beacon Hill Road from Sunset Bar and Grill until the beginning of White Sands Road, and Rhine Road, also known as Mullet Bay Road, after Sonesto Maho Beach Hotel to the entrance of Kupakoi from the intersection of the University Drive until the intersection of Rio Grande. For more information on how you can keep yourself and your family safe this hurricane season, visit stmartingolf.org/hurricane. This public service announcement is brought to you by the government of St. Martin. Hello, everyone. If you're just joining us, you're in the final segment of Inside Government, where I'm having a conversation with the Bureau of Telecommunications and Post. Juliana, we want to start going into this final segment talking about making sure the people of St. Martin are prepared for the hurricane season, and also encourage people to remember that we have our part to play as government and departments to make sure that we get prepared. Now, when you are not BTP and EOC is activated, you turn into Emergency Support Function number 2. Tell us, what then happens in the operations of BTP transforming to a support function group in the face of an emergency?
Okay, primarily what we do then at that point is we then become the emergency support function, whereby we provide all the support that is necessary in a telecommunications factor. And we look at radio station DCOM. If they all need to get messages out, we also serve as an intermediary between you, radio stations, TV stations, whatever it may be. We also assist government legislatively because, again, in the event of a state of emergency, we also have the right then to make a national network whereby we join all telco operators and make them a seamless roaming to ensure that we have coverage all over the island. In preparation, therefore, we have also scheduled a training in the first week of July with a professor from the Netherlands to come to St. Martin and give all our ESF members a training in emergency service communication with handheld radios. I think it's important for us to remember, and I keep on saying this over and over and over for us, that the main tool to be used in an emergency is always a handheld radio, not your cell phone, not Wi-Fi, satellite radios, the walkie-talkies as we know them. That is the most secure one. So we are going to offer a training once again, the first week of July to all our ESF. And we're also going to extend it to other vulnerable services within the community. For example, the Red Cross, the lab, the hospital, and all those other entities, the ones that help us during the hurricane to share out goods and all of that. I think it's important for all of them to make a small investment for that short hurricane period. You can do a temporary registration with C3 whereby you keep the radios for only 3 months during the hurricane season. That way you're always on standby whenever you need it. In the event of emergency, then they just program the radios and you get them. But it's the safest way and the most secure way to remain in contact with everyone. In addition thereto, I also want to remind the operators about their emergency plans. We also safeguard the infrastructure because remember, all the satellite stations have diesel, so diesel becomes top priority during a hurricane. So we also safeguard those areas for our operators and all invested parties.
When it comes to disaster, we always look at the worst case scenario that telecommunications becomes a challenge. You have zero connectivity. Satellite also comes up as a part of a conversation, as a possibility. Is that something we're exploring? What are the options there that we're looking at?
We do have agreements signed with our counterparts in the Netherlands and in Curaçao, where they will then support us and deploy their teams here to set up temporary connections for us. So then they deploy the mobile satellites like we had during Irma here in the backyard by the government building. And they will then provide connectivity, but solely for the critical infrastructure. So government, police, fire department, ambulance. We're not talking about the general population. We're talking about solely for the critical infrastructure. There is also UN groups that travel throughout the whole year, giving support to any disasters that take place. And they often come as well with some kind of equipment to assist our operators to reset back up their networks with, if they need antennas, cables, whatever it may be, they will bring those in. But then again, that is really in a state of emergency. So we still always urge all our operators to do have some backup materials in-house in the event short fixes need to be made in a state of emergency or a disaster.
Looking at, of course, my favorite topic of internet connectivity, the St. Martin has been an owner of its fiber line, the one that runs through Puerto Rico.
Correct.
I know the SMPR1. I wanted to ask you about that in regard to where are we with trying to establish and repair that broken line. Where are we in this particular position?
I've had a discussion with the cable owner, the Telem group of companies. Unfortunately, the break was on Puerto Rico's side. Puerto Rico has much more stricter guidelines than we would have. You have the nature department, because the cable is passing over coral reef. They had to do researches and ensure that no damage would be done to the coral when repairing the cable. There's environmental groups that they have to negotiate and lobby with. And then there's also the planning of the cable vessel that travels around the world repairing the cables. There are several things that have to be taken into consideration. The remaining cable life on the cable to see if it's worth that investment. We have been back and forth on that topic. And they have mentioned the intention to finally go through with the repair. But I think right now the financial constraints are the biggest issue that Telem is facing in repairing this cable. In the meantime, we have found connectivity on Flow's cable out of St. and that is basically how the island is now being connected. We're looking into the possibility of establishing a microwave link between us and Anguilla, whereby we will then be able to connect on Flow Anguilla's cable because they have much more capacity coming in. Flow Anguilla offers minimal 100 megabits to their customers. So we have a lot more option and opportunity connecting with them, but then it gets via microwave. So it's susceptible to weather and all those different factors as well. But there is work being done to ensure internet connectivity on the island at a stable and reasonable level.
And I hope affordable also at some point too.
Key.
Yeah,
Affordable
key,
as well.
affordable
Exactly.
as well. But it's good to know that the capacity is there and and that at some point in time, because we're doing a fantastic job, I have to say, along the lines of ensuring that capacity is
available.
Yes,
and it's
definitely.
Expanding as well.
Exactly. Ladies, we are running out of time, and I want to give you this opportunity.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, we're going to have to invite you back for another conversation.
Okay.
But I'll give you this opportunity now. Final words to the public of St. Martin as it relates to your respective disciplines. Let's start with Ms. Krista Pontiflat.
Well, I would just encourage the public to visit our website. We try to post what we've been doing, press releases. Often our website's very user-friendly, so if you would want to, if you have any issues relating to any complaints you want to file, you can always contact us on www.sxmregulator.sx. And thank you for listening.
And Mrs. Judiana Labega Hoover, your final words.
My final words are BTP has been in a negative light for a short period of time. We've made a transition. I encourage everyone to educate themselves about BTP. On our website, there's lots of legislation regarding the post and telecommunications sector that also focuses on the user rights and users. I'm talking about you and I. Educate yourself. Read the legislation. Take time to look at it. Know where your strengths are as a population, because BTP is not only here for Minister, for Telem, but also for the consumers. So I really encourage everyone to make use of this opportunity to educate yourselves, to enlighten yourself, and to raise the standard, raise the bar.
Interim Director of Bureau of Telecommunications and Posts, Mrs. Judiana Labega Hoover, and Ms. Krista Pontiflat, the Office Manager and Responsibility for Postal Affairs at BTP. Ladies, thank you so much for being a part of this edition of the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Cedric.
And to our radio listeners, television viewers, and online viewers, thank you for tuning in and being a part of this conversation. If you've missed it, be sure to catch video on demand at the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin at facebook.com/SXMGOV. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel of the Government of St. Martin at youtube.com, Government of St. Martin. And for audio playback, tune into St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM throughout the course of the day for a replay of the conversation with BTP. On behalf of my colleagues at the Bureau of Telecommunications and Post, and of course all of us here at DCOM, the Department of Communication, I'm Cedric Peterson. Thanks so much for tuning in.